And welcome Phil here, Phil O'Connor from Ford. Nice big round of applause. Well, Phil, I think, well, first, I guess you have a long title, but
I'm not even sure what it is, to be honest.
I have it as Global Head of Marketing Communications, Ford Blue and Model E, championing brand growth and innovation. Does that sound right?
Well, it sounds like more of a title and a description, an aspiration maybe.
Well,
Is this on?
I got you right here.
Oh, all right. All right. Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
well, so anyway, aside from the long title, you were at Ford early on, about 14 years. Then Nissan, and then also you went to Infinity, and now you're back at Ford.
I am. They call me a boomerang.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
but what do you bring back? Like, obviously being back must be kind of old home, kind of, but at the same point, you bring back new things that you were taking in from these other brands.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yes. It does feel like coming home for sure. So I did. I started at Ford in the 90s, calling on dealers. I'm a sales guy. I actually had a dealer call me a sales guy recently, or a dealer guy is what they said, and I thought that was actually a compliment. But I started calling on dealers in Chicago and in New York, and then did a bunch of marketing roles and product marketing roles at Ford. My last job was the Super Duty brand manager, so that vehicle sits really close to my heart. And then was fortunate enough to be able to join Nissan and worked at Infinity. I was the CMO at Infinity for a number of years, and then this opportunity presented itself. So I'm basically responsible for consumer marketing globally at Ford. So the way we're structured, many of you may know, but we have Ford Blue, which is our ICE and hybrid business. We have Ford Model E, which is our electric vehicle business, and then we have Ford Pro, which is our commercial business. And so all of the consumer business, Model E and Blue, and then the after-sales business rolls up through our team.
Well, in talking ICE, I mean, you guys, this is just a few of the list, but Ford is number one ICE brand, number two EV brand, and number three hybrid brand in the U.S.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So first, congratulations. That's pretty amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we're very proud of that.
Yeah, well, what do you credit it to? I mean, there's a lot of, you can take product, you can take strategy companies, whatever, but really, what's the overall, what you think is the reason for this?
Yeah, well, truthfully, it was one of the things that attracted me back to Ford was the opportunities that the company has, because I think the first there's a number of things that you could attribute that success to. Being close to the customer is one, and I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point later, but that's certainly a contributor. The breadth of the product. Our CEO, Jim Farley, talks a lot about passion products. They're very important to him, and he believes that every product should be a passion product, in that it should be differentiated from the segment. It should be emotionally compelling, and I think that many of our products are. And then I think the last thing is the breadth of powertrains, that we really do want to offer choice. We've been building ICE engines for over 100 years. We've been building hybrids for over 20 years. We've got our first generation EVs in market. They're doing well. And then, of course, diesel with Super Duty, so that dominates. And so we really do offer a breadth of powertrains. And so really core to who we are as a company, particularly in this climate, is we want the customer to make the choice as to what powertrain they choose, and we want to offer class-leading powertrains across the board, and then allow the customer to make the choice that's best suited for them. So that's really, I think, what's contributed to success more than anything.
Letting consumers choose, and you call it the freedom of choice. And so specifically, is there a way you're doing it that really, everyone, not everyone, but a lot of different companies offer different, whether it's EV or ICE, but just in terms of how you're maybe presenting that to consumers, and talk about the freedom of choice.
So the freedom of choice campaign, which is, I think, what Lisa's referring to, was the first full campaign that we did last year. Launched it in April. And it's a campaign that was designed to really let consumers know that if they came to a Ford dealership, that they would have the ability to choose from a plethora of not only vehicles but powertrains. And it was really interesting what we found. We we always aspire to this, but it's rare, I think, when you have a brand building tier one campaign that impacts the entire funnel. And this was one of the things that I thought was a learning for us, was that when we launched this campaign and started to measure the results of it and start thinking about PDCA and how do we optimize and all of those things that everyone does, we started to see this impact that consumers not only had a better perception of Ford when they saw the campaign in the areas that we wanted them to, like capability and brand opinion, but that it really did impact their shopping behavior. And so that was when we took a step back and said, wait a second, we think the choice that we have in our products really is compelling, because it's not only helping the brand, but it's driving sales. And so that was what we found with the Freedom of Choice campaign, and the notion of offering a breadth of choices to consumers.
Right. Well, let's take a look at the campaign.
How you choose to power up is up to you. But if you want the horizon chasing, rubber burning, dream building, adrenaline pumping power to do, Ford is your starting line. Gas, hybrid, or all electric, the power is yours.
All right. Well, and so sort of coming off of this and giving consumers freedom of choice, but also just understanding consumers today. It's more difficult today, but it's more relevant. I mean, consumers are constantly changing, and that requires data. That requires really knowing your consumer. And obviously, this was part of it, but how else are you able to really fine-tune what your consumers are looking for and really know what you need to create and what is relevant to people?
Well, what I've found that's in coming back to Ford, and I knew this when I worked for Ford the first time, so this is it's another reason why I was interested in coming back and coming home to Ford, was because everyone has access to data, and everyone looks at report after report to look for insights and to look for a competitive advantage. And there are a number of people at Ford in certain segments. So I think truck is a great example, but there are others, Bronco and Mustang, where if you talk to the people who are responsible for product development and the brand teams that are responsible for driving future development, you realize that these are people who are completely emotionally invested into the consumer and to their product. It's not just about the numbers on a spreadsheet. And I actually, on Tuesday, we had our National Ford Dealer Advertising Association meeting. We had all of our chairman and vice chairman, so it was about 100 people that meet. It was a really important meeting for us. And one of the folks who got up and spoke was our the head of truck at Ford, who's kind of an icon in the truck world. And I used to work with him. I had the privilege to work with this person my first stint at Ford years ago. And I was telling a story to the dealers about him, because he wakes up, he goes to bed, everything he does during the day is all about truck, all about F-Series. He lives F-Series, he owns F-Series. So for him, it's not looking for insights on a spreadsheet. He lives the lifestyle. So when they innovate, he has a personal vested interest. So it's quite different. But I was telling a story about him because he wrote the culture on the truck team is different. And it stems back to years ago, he was really led the authoring of truck team rules. And I thought, and these truck team rules were actually published on the front of Automotive News. And they're silly, but they establish a culture. There are things like, if you're on the truck team at Ford, you're not allowed to put sprinkles on your ice cream. You're not allowed to use a roller bag when you're going to the airport, because it's about being tough. If you can't leave the office until an hour before your flight. Otherwise, you need to work up until, so those kind of, but there were about 20 rules like that. But it established, there's a culture of where people are just so connected to the truck world that it's not replicable. I don't believe. And so anyway, I think that kind of passion is what's driving the success that we're talking
Well,
about.
and you mentioned, I mean, with obviously the F Series, but the Mustang, like you guys, you really do have these communities where people are so loyal to that particular vehicle. And so even when you're talking, we were talking to your developers, but also I'm sure you're seeing those kind of communities, whether it's on social media or through events or anything, that you're getting that same kind of feedback to really see what they're looking for to how to advance it for the next time.
Yeah, we're really fortunate because when the CEO talks about passion products, he's not talking about passion from us. He's talking about the passion the consumer has. And we do have a lot of vehicles that have where consumers have rallied around those products. You know, I mentioned some of them, but there's no doubt. And so we do absolutely try to nurture that and foster it and connect with it. And I think that also helps us to stay connected to consumers.
And as the marketer, you need to then hone in on all of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Where you take that, and as well as, I'm sure, your own due diligence that you need to do.
It's a tailwind for us, no doubt.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, all right, so let's really get more into the brand itself, brand level, and the Ford's newest vehicles, which is including the Explorer. Now, you guys recently launched that earlier this year. So talk about that and really how you were able to not only successfully reach your audience, but you gained such a sizable increase when you reached women, you know, and what was the agenda behind that? Like, what was the messaging behind that, and how you were able to really elevate that?
Yeah, the Explorer was an example for me of when the product and the marketing is really connected well, because the Explorer was a major change to an existing vehicle. And so the engineers and the designers they really had to be focused about what they wanted to change about an existing vehicle. And then from a marketing standpoint, we had to very much understand that motivation and then continue it into the market. And so the big changes to the Explorer were the IT system, which is a revolutionary change for us, and then the interior, which it's beautiful, but it was a big change. Some of the other components on the vehicle didn't change, but they really focused the investment in those two areas. So then we were able to take that and leverage it and speak to a very specific group of consumers, which were younger Gen X and millennial females, through a language that has really resonated. And we talked to them, and when you see the spot, it's really about these women who have extraordinarily busy lives but aspire to more, and they want to get outside of their comfort zone, and they want to, while they need a vehicle to help them with that extraordinarily busy life. That's an inviolable. They have to do that, but they want more. And the investments that the engineers and the designers made were a dead-on bullseye towards that audience, and it's really resonated. And so when you bring a message that resonates with a consumer, with a product advancement that meets a consumer need, there's a bit of magic. And I think in this case, if sales and shopping activity are any indication, then that's happened.
Well, let's let them know what they're talking about.
Let's get out. Let's get lost. With backup plans. And no plans at all. Let's get dirty. Skin knees and splinters. Let's get out. And let the world in. The new 2025 Ford Explorer. It's all in the name.
So I know that it's not that women weren't buying Explorers before, but was that what you wanted to set out? You obviously, the developers decided to advance it in certain ways. Why did you want to go after, I get the younger audience, but why specifically female? I don't necessarily know that you would always associate women with Explorers and that kind of thing. So I'm just curious why that was the angle that you guys were looking for, or the not the angle, but you know what I'm saying, where you were looking to sort of create that new audience.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, because the Explorer brand itself, which it's the best-selling SUV of all time, so it's very well known and established as a brand. But the segment does heavily skew women, and women influence, forgetting the segment, they influence 80+% of all vehicle purchases. And so when you combine the two and you looked at where the opportunity was, we felt like that's where it was. And it's really stemmed from the product folks who had identified this. So it's a vehicle that appeals to both sexes. It's a 400 horsepower. It's a great performance vehicle. It's got a rear-wheel drive bias. I mean, it's got all of those things. But at the same time, which by the way appeal to women too. It's not to, but it also has tremendous versatility and all-wheel drive and the cachet, the brand cachet that Explorer brings. And so I think that's appealing. You know, this, as I said, it's really an example of when we find a very focused audience to go after. The designers and product engineers and product people design a great product that targets that consumer, and then the messaging follows it up. That's when it all works.
And you saw a lot of success with that.
Well, I think one indication is it's new. I mean, the Explorer campaign launched in October, so this is a relatively new launch for us, but we've already seen shopping activity at all-time highs for the brand, which is saying something when you're talking about the best-selling SUV of all time. So yes, we are seeing tremendous success from that standpoint.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, and we've been talking about electric vehicles, and of course, it's always continues to be a hot topic, and we've heard how but there just has to be more awareness. There was, at one point, everyone was talking EV, and then the sales have been dropping a bit. So they've been softening, and that sort of shows the real importance of consumers aren't knowing necessarily how can I get an electric vehicle? I can't, I don't have a house, I don't have this, whatever it may be. So that kind of awareness is so important. And you guys have the Ford Power Promise in order to sort of enlighten people more. So can you talk about that a little bit and where that came about?
Yeah, so the Ford Power Promise, I'm really proud of our team, and it's an extended team. It's not just marketing that worked on this and identified this, but the Ford Power Promise came from the identification of some barriers that consumers have to buying EVs, and it stems from the evolution of the consumer themselves. As early adopters have effectively now all purchased EVs, those who are, and really we're moving on to the early majority and the larger audience who's now thinking about EVs in many cases, but doesn't have the same risk aversion or the same willingness to take risk that early adopters do. And some of the barriers that we're finding are things like they just don't know how to have a charger installed. And so when we started to look at these barriers, we thought we might be able to put together a program that would directly address some of these barriers and allow us to differentiate our EVs in a way that would get us at least somewhat out of the transaction price decline that is affecting the entire industry. And so the idea is that if you buy a Ford EV, you get a free charger. That's not particularly innovative, but we will also plan the installation and pay for it for you, as well as provide substantial support through the entire process. And so what we're finding is that it's really resonating with a lot of consumers who have a use cycle that an EV may be best for. There are many, many people who would be better off with an EV, but some of these barriers have kept them from making the jump. And so that was what drove the development of the Ford Power Promise.
You can see the ad. See the ad, Eric.
We want you to start every day with the charge you need. So we're giving you this home charger and covering the cost of standard installation. The Ford Power Promise. Electric vehicle confidence from day one.
And no one's ever gotten tired of John Denver, right? So you
Never. Well, what are you seeing? Like, obviously, this is an awareness that people need, and you need to let people know how they can do it and make it easier, make that path easier. Have you been seeing uptick in terms of people? I know it's soon, and it's obviously going to be a process, but to say, okay, wow, yeah, I can do this now. You seeing it resonate with consumers?
So it's been really an interesting evolution. There's no doubt that this is resonating with consumers. We're seeing it in both in all of the data. We see shopping increase. We've seen showroom traffic increase. We've seen anecdotally our dealers are saying now, don't stop it. You need to continue it, even though what we're finding is that a lot of consumers come in the dealership and the dealer will help them get a charger installed outside of the program, which is fine. But what we're finding is it brings a lot of consumers in, and then our dealers are actually getting better and better and better at the conversation. And it's quite a different conversation with a consumer about EVs than it is about gas, because you have to deal with things like charger installation, among other things. Just helping a customer get comfortable with the idea of owning an EV. It's like a cell phone, as you know. I'm probably preaching to the choir. Many of you at least have a pretty good understanding of it, but it is quite a different conversation. So it's not just about running an ad. It's about making, in this case, it's about making sure that the sales consultants on the showroom floor are conversant in how to talk about EV ownership and the EV lifestyle. So, but so far, what the data shows and what dealers are telling us is that it's making a difference.
Yeah, I mean, and that, just getting the discussion started is really, I think, because I think when EVs first came out, you have those who were very gung-ho and yes, but I know just personally talking with people, no, I'm not going to drive whatever amount of miles and then suddenly I have no gas, or I mean, I can't get gas and there's nowhere to go. So I think it's that not knowing is what maybe one of the biggest barriers.
Yeah, and what dealers are telling us is they'll take a customer, our really good ones, and in a series of a few questions, they can identify if someone's driving habits would fit and what an EV offers, and if they do, they'll just ask, could I at least show you an EV? And then it really goes well from there. For a consumer who listens and makes the leap, they're almost always happier. And for those where it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. So that's the freedom of choice.
Getting to know your customer.
There you go.
All comes back to that. So we're talking about all these different things and just looking at the past year and all the changes that we've seen, and what's the one thing that you've maybe taken out of all this that's the biggest learning for you that you're excited about really moving forward with and going into 2025?
Yeah, from a marketing perspective, and I'm just speaking for our team, what I'm really excited about is the fact that this past year, so there's been so many dynamics that are impacting all of us. Coming out of COVID, the business starts to normalize. We're getting back to trench warfare in the auto industry, so that's normalizing, which is difficult enough. And then on top, and you all feel this too in one way or another, but then on top of it, you layer in the regulatory environment and consumer behavior shifts with EV and other things. I mean, the shopping behavior of consumers is changing dramatically because of, e-commerce and other things. So the learning for me has been that we have to be incredibly nimble in all of the areas of our business in marketing. So whether it's media investment, whether it's creative, whether it's, varying channels within media, we have to be ready to pivot very, very quickly. So, and now what we're finding is we're doing this on a pretty regular basis. We're pivoting everything from the tier one brand work that we're doing, which used to be, you would never change that, or it would take months and months. And now, I mean, we just made a change 2 weeks ago, like overnight. And then, but all the way down the funnel, we have to be watching the data very quickly. And it's forcing a lot of, I think, exciting changes within our team dynamic. So we've got to be much closer, talking much more frequently, in much more robust ways, and be much more data-driven. We don't have the ability to sit around and look at monthly reports anymore. We have to have data available at our fingertips. We have to have people who are serving data with insight so that we can decision off of it very quickly. So that kind of nimbleness is just required. And it used to be that there were certain things you just don't touch, and you never touch a brand campaign. Now it's all on the table.
Yeah, well, and so with all of these learnings, but let's look at 2025. What are you most excited about? Like, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, well, we've got some great stuff coming. We've got
And then after that, you guys can ask questions.
we've got Bronco Sport and Maverick, which are two of these passion products, super exciting vehicles. We have a Maverick Lobo. We've got an all-new Expedition coming later in the year. So we've got, we're going to start even promoting even more our remote services, which maybe doesn't sound that exciting, but we've got more service vans on the road servicing consumers than any brand in the industry. It's a brand differentiator for us, we believe. We're going to start promoting that more, because if you buy a Ford, who knew it, but you can call your dealer and have someone come to your driveway and fix your car, do an oil change, whatever, and you never have to leave. It's a super powerful thing. So we've got that. So there's a huge amount of activity at all levels, and so next year's going to be really exciting.
Sounds awesome. All right. Well, do we have any questions for Phil?
I have a question. It's Tanya.
Hey, Tanya.
Are we going to see you on the Super Bowl?
I'm sorry.
Are we going to see Ford on the Super Bowl this year?
Well, not in the. Not. I think you have to call it the big game, don't you, Tanya?
Oh,
You're
I
not
can
allowed to
call
use
it the
the term.
Super Bowl. I don't care.
You may see us around the Super Bowl.
Okay, good enough.
Right here in the middle.
Hey, Phil. Big fan, have an F-150. I have a question for you.
Thanks for
as
your
a brand,
business.
no problem. As a brand marketer, how do you navigate the fine line between choice paralysis and freedom of choice, given the time horizon for research, consideration, intent, and ultimately purchase? How do you walk that line or think about that?
That's a challenge that Ford's been dealing with for a long time, because complexity is something that's really been a challenge to Ford for years and years and years. I mean, when I worked at Ford the first time, I think we calculated that F-Series could be built in 3 billion combinations. No, that's not even a joke, 3 billion combinations. So we are working very hard to simplify in many ways. So there is sort of a coming, there's a conflict here. There's no doubt. But that comes back to knowing the customer. So we're simple. So in the case, what we're working on is simplifying trim levels and options so that we're able to give the customer a choice, but make it as simple as possible. So when we're talking about freedom of choice, we're talking about powertrains and vehicle lines where there's quite a delineation between a Bronco Sport and an F-Series, for instance. So, but I think that's a great question, and something that we're definitely wrestling with. We think it can be a competitive advantage if we can figure it out better than others, frankly.
Got
Thank
another
you.
one over here.
Hey, Phil, how are you? Steve Schmidt. Let me start with my better half is a 24-year employee of Ford, so thank you for that.
Awesome.
Partnerships have been a big theme, ecosystem partnerships. Example, ChargePoint and Airbnb recently partnering to entice EV owners. They stay longer, they spend more money at these rentals. Can you talk a little bit about how Ford is thinking about sort of these cross-brand ecosystem partnerships?
Well, we were the first one to partner with Tesla for their supercharger network, so I don't think we're not opposed to it at all. We certainly want to make ownership as easy as it can possibly be. So it's definitely on the radar. We think about that a lot. I can't go into any specifics, but I can tell you that that understanding the use case of owning an EV is something that we think is key to success. It's evolving, and we're spending a lot of time on that for sure.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you, Phil. That was awesome.
Oh,
Again.
great. Thank you, Lisa. Thanks, everyone.